As the summer of 1940 wore on, the skies over southern England darkened with the menace of war, signaling the epic confrontation between the British Royal Air Force, RAF, and the German Luftwaffe. The Battle of Britain was not just a fight for air superiority. It was a crucial moment in World War II that would determine the fate of Great Britain and potentially shift the balance of power in Europe. Central to this aerial conflict were two formidable aircraft, the British Supermarine Spitfire and the German Messerschmitt Bf 109. The dogfights between these aircraft would become legendary, symbolizing the tenacity of the human spirit and the technology of war. From July to October of 1940, these machines engaged in a lethal ballet over English skies, as tactics, innovation, and sheer human resilience converged in a battle for survival. At the heart of the RAF's strategy was the Integrated Air Defense System, orchestrated by Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding. This system relied on a combination of radar technology, ground-based observation, and fighter aircraft. The chain-home radar network had been established to provide early warning of incoming German raids, allowing the RAF to scramble its fighters effectively. This innovative approach marked a substantial departure from traditional military doctrine, where information was often passed through slower means. The radar stations, with their newly developed capabilities, became the eyes of the Royal Air Force, enabling it to track enemy movements and adjust its tactical responses with unprecedented speed and accuracy. In the face of overwhelming odds, the RAF's fighter command was an amalgamation of seasoned veterans and fresh pilots, many of whom were barely out of their teens. The psychological strain of flying into battle against a numerically superior enemy weighed heavily on these young men, who knew that every sortie could be their last. The experience of pilots such as Douglas Bader and Johnny Johnson exemplified the mixture of bravery and fear that characterized the RAF during this period. Pilots were trained not just in the mechanics of flight, but also in the rigorous demands of aerial combat. They learned to exploit the strengths of their aircraft while remaining acutely aware of their vulnerabilities. The Spitfire, with its elliptical wings and exceptional agility, became the embodiment of British tenacity. It was a machine that could turn sharply, climb quickly, and gain the upper hand in dogfighting scenarios, especially against the more streamlined and faster Bf 109, which excelled at high-speed engagements. The German Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, approached the Battle of Britain with a calculated confidence that stemmed from their earlier triumphs in Poland and France. The air campaign was expected to be a swift affair, as the Luftwaffe had numerical superiority, with around 1,000 aircraft deployed against the RAF's 500. The initial strategy involved a systematic bombing campaign aimed not only at crippling British air defenses, but also at disrupting the morale of the civilian population. This involved targeting military installations, airfields, and factories, with the hope that a weakened RAF would be forced to capitulate. However, as successive raids unfolded, it became clear that the Luftwaffe had underestimated the effectiveness of British ground defenses and the resolve of its pilots. In the skies, the dogfights that ensued were characterized by strategy and instinct. The limitations of both aircraft created a dynamic environment of risk and opportunity. The Bf 109, known for its speed and firepower, boasted a pair of 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns and a 20mm MG-FF cannon, providing it with significant firepower during engagements. However, it was less maneuverable than the Spitfire. This disparity was not merely a question of aerodynamics, but also of tactics. British pilots quickly learned to maneuver in a way that took advantage of their aircraft's agility, executing low, tight turns to outflank and surprise their German adversaries. Conversely, Luftwaffe tactics began to favor head-on attacks, relying on their speed and firepower to blast through formations. This tactical clash was a battlefield of wills, one where individual skill often determined the outcome of encounters. But the Battle of Britain was not solely a contest of machines and tactics. It was also a conflict marked by profound human sacrifice. Ground crews worked tirelessly to maintain the Spitfires, and Hurricanes ready for flight, battling against fatigue and fear with determination and ingenuity. These unsung heroes played an essential role in the fight, ensuring that pilots could take to the skies at a moment's notice. The emotional and psychological toll of the battle extended beyond the pilots in the air and the technicians on the ground. Entire communities held their breath as the Air Ministry reported on the day's casualties, which were often shrouded in uncertainty and sorrow. The perceived specter of invasion loomed large alongside the constant cadences of air raid sirens, plunging everyday life into a state of turmoil. As the Luftwaffe intensified its campaign, launching massive raids known as the Blitz, the fabric of British life became interwoven with the realities of war. Towns and cities were subjected to relentless bombings that transformed the night into an inferno of fire and destruction. In response, the British spirit shone through. Defiance flourished amidst the wreckage as citizens rallied around the RAF, honoring their efforts with unyielding support. Rallies, public speeches, and news broadcasts celebrated the courage of the pilots, turning them into national heroes in the eyes of the public. The iconic phrase, "never in the field of human conflict," was so much owed by so many to so few, famously uttered by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, captured the essence of the RAF's efforts and galvanized the British population around a common cause. By September 1940, the pressure on the RAF reached critical levels. On several occasions, Downing's leadership was tested, as he had to make difficult decisions on resource allocation and combat readiness. In spite of the odds, and with mounting losses, the Spitfire and the Hurricane would not yield. The culmination of technological innovation, tactical rigor, and indomitable human resolve became evident as RAF pilots mounted fierce counteroffensives, thwarting daylight assaults and providing a glimmer of hope against a seemingly insurmountable foe. On several pivotal days, RAF pilots shot down significant numbers of Luftwaffe aircraft, asserting the significance of morale and the psychological impact of success in battle. As this relentless aerial contest unfolded, every moment brought with it both triumphs and tragedies. The losses were staggering on both sides, with the psychological scars borne by survivors becoming an indelible mark of that harrowing season. While the Supermarine Spitfire earned its place as a symbol of courage and resilience, the German Luftwaffe's strategic blunders and inability to neutralize the RAF proved fateful. The dogfights over British skies defined not only the fate of the Battle of Britain, but also laid the groundwork for future aerial warfare, showcasing the evolution of tactics that would inform air combat for decades to come. Ultimately, the perseverance of the RAF demonstrated that, although it was machines that clashed in the sky, it was the human spirit that truly fought for the outcome of this crucial moment in history. As the intense battles raged through the late summer and into the autumn of 1940, the Royal Air Force, RAF, faced monumental challenges in the air, each decision laden with dire consequences. The most skilled British pilots were tasked with the aerial defense of their homeland, often in harrowing conditions that tested not only their flying skills, but also their mental fortitude. The airspace over southern England became a battleground where speed, tactics, and machinery coalesced into a desperate fight for survival. The iconic Supermarine Spitfire, which adorned the British skies with its sleek elliptical wings and formidable Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, became a crucial part of the RAF's air combat strategy. It was in this crucible of conflict that not only mechanical prowess but human creativity and resolve would dictate the outcome. The Luftwaffe, under the command of Hermann Göring, sought total air superiority through sustained bombing campaigns, aiming to cripple the RAF's infrastructure and morale. Initial tactics employed by the German Luftwaffe involved coordinated attacks on airport installations, radar stations, and aircraft manufacturing plants. These bombings caused considerable damage, leading to a desperate need for the RAF to innovate its defensive strategies. The British pilots often faced overwhelming numerical odds, flying against formations of Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Bf 110s, each armed with heavy cannons and capable of inflicting severe damage should they manage to penetrate the thin line of defense established by the Spitfires. Nonetheless, the RAF responded with a combination of strategic dispersion and highly coordinated attacks. The decision to rely on the agile Spitfire and the sturdy Hawker Hurricane created a duality in tactics. Where the Spitfire excelled in dogfights with its superior speed and maneuverability, the Hurricane proved effective at absorbing damage while delivering devastating firepower. One of the most significant developments during this period was the RAF's decision to utilize the integrated air defense system facilitated by radar technology. The chain-home radar system significantly enhanced reconnaissance capabilities, allowing British pilots to intercept the Luftwaffe effectively before they even crossed the coastline. With this technological edge, Fighter Command developed a strategy of scramble and intercept, which allowed them to commit available squadrons into combat at a moment's notice. The directors of the RAF, including the astute Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, faced the implementation of these strategies with foresight. However, the highly charged atmosphere of the war also brought with it friction and disagreements over resource allocation, which became acute as losses mounted steadily. As the Luftwaffe shifted tactics following failed assaults against the RAF's operational capacities, they turned their attention toward targeting British cities in a bid to undermine morale. London, in particular, became a focal point of these bombings, leading to mass civilian casualties and destruction. The Battle of Britain had escalated from a purely military engagement to a cataclysm involving the civilian population, with homes reduced to rubble and lives torn apart. Pilots, aware of the collateral damage their efforts had caused, wrestled not only with the enemy in the skies, but also with the grave reality that their fight transcended mere strategy. It was a battle for the soul of Britain itself. The airmen's resolve was embedded with a profound sense of duty and compassion for their compatriots, fighting not just for air supremacy, but to protect their homes and families. Ethical ramifications aside, the evolution of dogfighting tactics became increasingly pronounced. British pilots adopted a strategy that emphasized aggressive tactics, focusing on turning the tables on their German adversaries. The Spitfire pilots learned to employ the more sophisticated deflection shooting technique, a method that allowed them to engage targets effectively at varying angles of attack. This skill became essential, as they often found themselves having to engage highly skilled Luftwaffe pilots who were trained in the art of vertical maneuver and brute-strength tactics provided by their well-armed aircraft. Close-quarter engagements, famously known as dogfights, saw Spitfires weaving and darting through the skies, as pilots utilized their superiority in agility to outmaneuver the more sluggish Messerschmitts. The emotional weight of this continuous barrage of combat tactics proved grave for the young aviators. Many pilots faced the stark reality of loss, witnessing their friends and comrades being shot down or captured in action. The psychological toll of witnessing death became a recurring theme, with some pilots suffering from what would later be termed combat fatigue, a precursor to what is now understood as post-traumatic stress disorder. They bore not only the scars of battle on their bodies, but also wounds deep within their minds and souls. Yet despite these challenges, they pressed on, finding solace in the camaraderie of their fellow pilots who shared their burdens and dreams. As October bore down upon them and the nights grew increasingly longer, the combat conditions took a turn for the worse. With fewer daylight hours for engagements, the German Luftwaffe intensified their bombing campaigns under cover of darkness. The RAF had to adapt yet again, shifting tactics to include nighttime interceptions, a significantly harder task requiring synchronized teamwork and heightened awareness. For every night mission, pilots took up the challenge, often flying on little more than adrenaline and resolve, battling not just enemy aircraft but also the fatigue and psychological strain of relentless aerial warfare. The combat came to a dramatic head on what would become known as the Battle of Britain Day on September 15, 1940. Both sides engaged in an unprecedented number of sorties. Over 100 aircraft participated in the dogfights above London, leading to a massive clash that would etch itself into the annals of history. The result, emblematic of both losses and victories, saw the RAF claim numerous aerial victories, infusing a renewed sense of hope, not just in the pilots, but across the British Isles. Each downed aircraft became a communal triumph, a collective acknowledgement of the human spirit's resilience in the face of despair. The months that followed saw attrition taking its toll on the Luftwaffe, causing a shift in strategic priorities, and ultimately leading Germany to abandon its plans for a full-scale invasion of Britain. The tactical blunders made during this campaign, paired with the British spirit embodied by the RAF pilots, galvanized a nation against overwhelming odds and proved crucial for shaping the future landscape of warfare. The legacy of the Battle of Britain endured, illustrating the significance of air power and human ingenuity in modern conflict. In sum, the aerial war that unfolded over Britain was not merely a contest of machines, but a profound story of human endurance, tactical evolution, and the complexities of conflict. The dogfights between the Spitfires and Messerschmitts served as a microcosm of a global struggle that tested the boundaries of technological advancements, the depths of tactical ingenuity, and the emotional and psychological impacts on those who flew these aircraft. Their sacrifices became woven into the tapestry of history, serving as a testament to what it means to fight not just for victory, but for survival against the comprehensible darkness of war. If you found this account of the relentless battles over the skies of Britain both captivating and transformative, we invite you to delve deeper into the annals of history. Subscribe for more narratives from the front lines, and join the conversation in the comments below, sharing your thoughts on the human cost and technological evolution of warfare that shaped our world. As the summer of 1940 drew to a close, both the Royal Air Force, RAF, and the Luftwaffe found themselves at a critical juncture. The Battle of Britain, which had commenced with a series of feels somewhat disjointed yet intense skirmishes, evolved into a sophisticated aerial contest of wills, strategies, and technologies. The British defended their island tenaciously, relying on the innovative tactics of the RAF alongside the groundbreaking technology of the Supermarine Spitfire and Hawker Hurricane aircraft. Conversely, the German Luftwaffe, confident in its air superiority, met increasing resistance that would soon reveal chinks in what was believed to be an impenetrable armor. One of the most crucial elements in this contest was the development of effective tactics. The British pilots, under the guidance of Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, perfected their approach to air combat through the implementation of the big wing tactics. This involved assembling multiple squadrons to engage incoming raids en masse. While initially met with mixed results, the big wing strategy aimed to break enemy formations and maintain numerical superiority in engagements. The classic dogfight, in which a fighter plane would engage one-on-one with its foe, often favored those who made agile maneuvers under high-stress situations. In contrast, the RAF utilized a form of group tactics that allowed their pilots to work together, amplifying their advantages through coordinated attacks that overwhelmed isolated enemy fighters. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe's strategies highlighted a different set of tactical principles. Commanded by Hermann Göring, the German High Command focused primarily on destroying the RAF by targeting key airfields and radar stations that enabled the British to coordinate their defense. The blitzkrieg mentality that had allowed for rapid dominance in France was not as easily translatable to the skies over Britain. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, which had earned a fierce reputation as a dogfighter, was piloted by skilled Luftwaffe airmen, but initial successes waned as they encountered the tenacity and ingenuity of RAF pilots. The carefully honed tactics of both sides would soon be tested to their limit, and the human drama attached to each engagement further complicated tactical considerations. As the battle progressed, the Luftwaffe began to face challenges stemming from the increasing attrition rates of their aircraft and the toll on their pilots. Unlike the Germans, who employed a rotational system allowing fresh pilots to enter the fray continuously, the Royal Air Force's limited number of pilots, alongside the relentless pace of the conflict, meant that fatigue became a critical factor. On the RAF side, downed pilots often found themselves in perilous situations, and many would become prisoners of war, while the psychological strains of repeated aerial combat spawned an era of unprecedented courage mixed with doubt. Stories emerged of pilots suffering from what would later be termed combat fatigue, raising crucial questions about the mental toll of warfare on young men thrust into life-and-death dialogues above a battlefield inscribed and defined by its clouds. In the midst of this aerial drama, the technology of the Spitfire and its counterparts evolved as well. The veteran pilots learned to exploit the weather and terrain to their advantage. The Spitfire, equipped with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine capable of reaching speeds exceeding 360 mph, emerged as the ultimate symbol of defense against encroaching tyranny. Its elliptical wings allowed for unparalleled maneuverability, crucial in the high-speed turning fights that characterized dogfights. This aircraft's agility proved decisive against the more rigid configurations of the Messerschmitt Bf 109, which, though fast and efficient, lacked the same level of adaptability in a tight turn. RAF tactics emphasized the deflection shot, which involved firing at a target while leading it, accounting for relative speeds and angles. The proficiency with which British pilots adapted to their machines, coupled with the innate competitive spirit among them, became a defining characteristic of the conflict. Emerging patterns of air superiority began to shift in the latter half of 1940. The Luftwaffe's initial advantages diminished under the pressure of sustained RAF resistance. British morale surged with each reported enemy aircraft shot down, creating a psychological boost that radiated throughout the nation. The resilience shown by pilots like squadron leader Douglas Bader, the double amputee who defied the odds by leading high-energy missions, transformed the narrative from mere military engagements to symbolic acts of defiance. Each dogfight was more than a tactical necessity. It resonated deeply within the hearts of civilians and service members alike. The summer months gave way to the ominous shadows of autumn, and upon entering September, the Battle of Britain reached its zenith. The Blitz commenced, as the Luftwaffe transitioned from targeting airfields to bombing cities, including London, a strategic pivot aimed at breaking British morale. This shift altered the dynamics of the aerial campaign. The physically demanding and emotionally charged environment within the RAF intensified, as their mission expanded beyond just intercepting enemy fighters to include the protection of civilians and national infrastructure. The act of defending London revealed both the devastating impact of aerial warfare and the unyielding spirit of those who took to the skies. Navigating the wreckage of bombed buildings, British pilots hastily re-engaged the enemy amid the chaos, as they witnessed firsthand the human cost of their endeavors. Nonetheless, the dangers extended beyond the limits of the battlefield. Ground crews worked tirelessly, often under fire, to prepare aircraft for the next missions. They worked in conditions of uncertainty and fear, yet remained steadfast in their duty. Each aircraft that took off into that crumbling sky was a testament to human fortitude, serving not only as a weapon, but also as a symbol of hope. The conflict that unfolded over England, characterized by spirited dogfights, resonated deeply within the cultural memory of the time. The bravery and tactical ingenuity displayed by both the pilots of the RAF and Luftwaffe laid the groundwork for future aerial engagements in World War II. Above all, the Battle of Britain underscored the profound lesson that success in war is not governed solely by technological superiority or numerical advantage. More often than not, the tenacity of the human spirit, forged in the fires of despair, emerged as the true victor. As the skies turned from sunny brilliance to the gray melancholy of autumn, those engaged in this aerial war grappled with a profound understanding of sacrifice and duty. They marked a pivotal chapter in a larger narrative of conflict, wherein the fates of nations swung precariously on the bravery of individuals fighting for survival against insurmountable odds. Each dogfight echoed the resonance of a plea for freedom, a narrative steeped deep in history for generations to come. Thus unfolded a saga of resilience, where the label of hero was earned not merely in victory, but in the heart's capacity to endure against the backdrop of a chaotic world at war. As the Battle of Britain unfolded, the aerial landscape became a theater of both aerial maneuvers and strategic decisions that would have far-reaching implications. The RAF's success relied on a confluence of factors: the effectiveness of their aircraft, notably the Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane, and the tactical ingenuity of their commanders, who had to adapt in real time to the Luftwaffe's operational strategies. The Spitfire, known for its superior maneuverability and speed, contrasted distinctly with the Messerschmitt Bf 109, which dominated the early stages of the conflict with its powerful arsenal and performance. What began as a purely mechanical contest soon morphed into a profound clash of human will and technological innovation, where every pilot's life hinged not just on aircraft specifications, but also on training, morale, and the prevailing weather conditions. Strategically, the Luftwaffe initially aimed for air supremacy, a prerequisite for any successful invasion of Britain. They believed that by systematically dismantling the RAF's infrastructure, they could pave the way for Operation Sea Lion, the code name for the planned invasion of Britain. This meant targeting airfields, radar stations, and factories vital to aircraft production. However, what the Luftwaffe under General Hermann Göring underestimated was the British early warning system, exemplified by the chain-home radar network, which provided the RAF with crucial intelligence regarding enemy formations and movements. Utilizing a decentralized command structure, the RAF employed its fighter command flexibly. Commanders like Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding and his deputy, Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, recognized the value of effective communication and coordination, thereby allowing for rapid response to German sorties. The dogfights themselves were a brutal ballet of carnage and bravery. Pilots fought in a constrained environment, battling not just against enemy aircraft, but also affording their machinery the delicate balance between aggression and strategy. The Spitfire's ability to climb rapidly and turn sharply made them particularly effective against the more straightforward tactics employed by the Messerschmitts, focusing primarily on dive attacks. RAF pilots would often execute the highly maneuverable tactic, exploiting altitude and speed advantages, pulling tight turns and using the element of surprise to gain a shooting angle on their foes. The unmistakable sound of an approaching Spitfire became a rallying cry for beleaguered civilians on the ground, providing a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos of war. Yet the toll of aerial combat was steep, both physically and psychologically. Pilots returned from grueling missions, often facing an immediate need to engage in the next, even as their comrades fell in the heat of battle. Reports of stress-related disorders surged, with terms like battle fatigue entering the lexicon of the day, emblematic of the unseen wounds left on those who survived. Such conditions prompted commanders to grapple with the imperative to maintain pilot morale and effectiveness. To mitigate these stresses, the RAF instituted a rotational system, allowing pilots periods of rest while ensuring that operational numbers were sustained. The intricate dance of managing human resources alongside tactical demands painted a vivid picture of the complex challenges leaders faced. Ground crews and logistical units also played critical roles, often working in terrifying conditions under frequent aerial bombardment. It was not uncommon for them to hear the whir of enemy engines overhead, while they rushed to complete maintenance on aircraft that had just returned from a sortie. This dedication extended beyond mere duty. It became about preserving the very essence of hope for British citizens, who would stand and applaud as returning pilots soared low over their towns. Each repair, each refueling moment, carried the weight of several human lives still unserved on the battlefield. The operational efficiency of the RAF was thus a collective endeavor, merging the resolve of pilots with the untiring labor of ground crews. The combination of technical advances and human endurance bore its fruit as the dynamic of the Battle of Britain began to shift. Despite initial advantages in numbers and firepower, the Luftwaffe faced an uphill battle. The forced decision to shift tactics toward strategic bombing of London and other major cities, motivated by an attempt to demoralize the British populace, aimed to induce surrender by inflicting psychological terror. However, this move inadvertently galvanized the British resolve. The British public rallied around the RAF, fueled by stories of heroism from the skies and harrowing accounts of ground operations. Prominent figures such as Winston Churchill echoed this sentiment, delivering speeches that solidified the ethos of resilience within the population. The legendary slogan, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few," captured the rapport entre pilots and the civilian populace. As autumn approached, the Luftwaffe's operations became increasingly characterized by disarray. The toll of sustained enemy engagements forced German pilots to grapple with fatigue. A series of miscalculations culminated in grave mistakes, such as the disastrous decision to bomb the heart of London instead of targeting military assets. This shift played a pivotal role in turning the tide in favor of the RAF. The bomber formations became predictable, allowing British fighters to intercept with growing efficiency. Each encounter in the sky transformed into a visceral struggle for dominance, where trained instincts and raw courage clashed against the reality of loss and sacrifice. As winter set in, the landscape of the aerial combat changed once more. A tactical understanding between the adversaries developed, necessitating a re-evaluation of resources and deployment methods. Both sides sought to capitalize on any advantage, with German tactics evolving towards supplementary air raids, targeting factories and supply lines while moderating their operational intensity. The RAF defenders, meanwhile, adapted seamlessly to these evolving threats, employing new tactics like the top cover strategy that emphasized protecting vital installations and ensuring a sustainable force of air cover. The personal narratives of pilots became enveloped in this complex web of history. Many emerged from the chaos with scars that ran deeper than the physical wounds. The emotional toll stakes would haunt them for decades to come. Those who fought within the confines of their cramped cockpit, immersed in their planes, often recalled moments of solitude amid the constancy of engines roaring and bullets firing. The lone feeling of being an instrument for their countrymen's survival, facing the daunting specter of mortality in every engagement. In retrospect, the Battle of Britain serves not merely as a recounting of aerial engagements, it crystallizes an essential understanding of human valor, technical ingenuity, and the converging symphony of sacrifice that defines warfare. As autumn's pallor began to fade, the very act of confronting fear bloomed in the hearts and minds of those who soared above the skies of England, a testament to shared struggles, from which emerged not only victory over the enemy, but the indelible spirit of resilience. As the dust settled on those chaotic months, one fact remained unassailable. The Battle of Britain ignited a flame of hope, illuminating the darkened skies of war and forecasting the continued struggle for freedom in a world forever changed. As the summer of 1940 drew to a close, the air war over Britain became increasingly dire, each day steeped in an atmosphere charged with uncertainty and peril. The strategy of the Luftwaffe, initially geared towards subduing the Royal Air Force, RAF, and clearing the skies for a potential ground invasion, evolved rapidly under the pressures of ongoing engagement. The shift from focused attacks on airfields and fighter squadrons to a broader campaign targeting cities and infrastructure marked a critical change in approach, known as the Blitz. This tactic aimed to break British morale by instilling fear among the civilian population, thereby mentally crippling the war effort from the ground up. However, this decision brought with it profound repercussions, altering not only the battlefield, but also the psyche of the pilots and citizens alike. The pilots who flew the Supermarine Spitfire and Hawker Hurricane, the vanguards of Britain's aerial defense, were acutely aware of the shifting dynamics. The Spitfire, renowned for its unparalleled maneuverability and speed, gained notoriety among the pilots who soared within its confines. Equipped with 8 .303 Browning machine guns, it had the firepower to damage the enemy effectively. But it was the pilot's skill and the aircraft's agility that often turned the tide of a dogfight. The Hurricanes, too, played a crucial role, with their rugged design proving adept at absorbing damage while bringing down German fighters with their reliable armament. Yet to succeed, the RAF needed more than just exceptional aircraft. They required an intricate tangle of logistics, intelligence, and fortitude to ensure their fighters remained in the air. The command structure of the RAF, spearheaded by Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, faced insurmountable challenges during this period. Decision-making hinged upon accurate intelligence, as the British needed to anticipate the Luftwaffe's next move. Dowding implemented the Dowding system, an innovative radar network coupled with a robust communication system that allowed for real-time interception of enemy aircraft. Though radical for its time, the system was not without its flaws. Operators struggled to disseminate intelligence quickly enough, and the constant strain on resources was palpable. Pilots often found themselves scrambled from their bases, sometimes without adequate time to prepare or even suit up properly. Each mission became a gamble, with the ever-present specter of loss hanging above them. As the Luftwaffe shifted tactics, the effects on the ground were felt acutely. The docks and factories of London, pivotal in sustaining the war effort and keeping the populace fed and equipped, came under sustained attack. The sight of bombers darkening the skies led to a frenzied rush of civilian evacuation efforts. As buildings crumbled, a sense of resolve solidified among the British people, who rallied to support their beleaguered forces, even as the death toll rose. Camaraderie emerged within the intensity of everyday life, as citizens organized volunteer efforts to assist both the injured and the frontline fighters. In towns and cities across England, community spirit and resilience blossomed in the face of devastation, illustrating the profound connection between the combatants in the air and their fellow countrymen back home. The dogfights only grew more frantic, each engagement spiraling into a chaotic ballet of death and survival. RAF pilots, many barely out of their teenage years, experienced moments of both terror and transcendence as they turned their aircraft into veritable weapons of survival. Instances of near-miss engagements flooded their memories, the visceral realities of aerial combat transforming young men into hardened warriors overnight. They trained relentlessly, honing their skills in mock battles, creating an intuitive understanding of their opponent's tactics. Survival often boiled down to split-second decisions and unwavering courage amid the torrent of fire and metal. New tactics emerged. Formations like the Vic and Finger 4 evolved to maximize firepower while offering mutual protection, although they required immense trust in one another's capabilities. The Germans, too, adapted in response. A pilot's effectiveness in sustaining their sortie could often be the difference between life and death. The Luftwaffe's pilots initially enjoyed a numerical superiority, but that advantage slowly waned as attrition took its toll. The seasoned pilots on both sides learned quickly. The odds of survival increasingly lay in an intimate understanding of their aircraft and the ability to predict the opponent's maneuvers. League after league of aerial skirmishes racked the skies over Britain, while on the ground, the toll of war could be sharply felt in the ruins of bombed homes. The psychological burden of loss clung to those in the thick of battle. The weight of comrades lost was heavy, their faces haunting the dreams of pilots who returned to base, often to face an empty chair at the communal mess. Despite the intensity of the battle, the RAF began to gain momentum. With each British fighter that climbed into the fray, a sense of optimism slowly permeated through the command structure. November marked a critical turning point. The Luftwaffe's initial overconfidence dimmed under the weight of mounting losses, and man for man, the skill of the RAF pilots began to shine through. The effectiveness of the British air strategy enlisted the support of civilians who would observe the pilots returning from battle, and their stories of bravery inspired not just their peers, but the nation as a whole. This cultural tape, woven from shared experiences of valiance and sacrifice, came to define a national identity, imparting a renewed sense of purpose. As winter approached, the air combat began to transition once again, with weather conditions increasingly challenging the tactical possibilities. The Luftwaffe's audacity waned as diminished daylight hours forced raids to oscillate between night and day, nonetheless compromising their effectiveness. They faced logistical constraints, resupply routes strained, and morale dipped as losses mounted over Britain's defenders. The morale of the British people surged, rallying behind the courageous pilots who had flown tirelessly to defend their homes, transforming the narrative of the war into one of resilience and defiance. The visceral toll of combat was illustrated poignantly through the grim realities experienced by the pilots. Emotional turmoil lingered among those who had clawed their way back to life after nearly perishing in the unforgiving embrace of battle. Each nightmarish encounter would etch itself into memory, creating a silent bond between those who flew in the dying light. As the battle drew on, the human costs of this relentless war began to manifest through the eyes of the young men who bore the scars and gallantry, intertwining personal grievances with a shared purpose in the annals of their nation's history. The Battle of Britain emerged as more than just a tactical victory or loss. It was a canvas upon which the spirit of a nation painted its struggle against tyranny, each color a testament to courage, sacrifice, and an unyielding commitment to freedom. This battle was not about the machines that roared across the skies, but rather the valor so deeply embedded in those who had taken flight. Together they wove the tapestry of human experience against the backdrop of one of history's darkest epochs. The resolution of the struggle left its mark indelibly inscribed within the soul of a generation, fostering a legacy that would echo through the corridors of time far beyond the roar of engines and the fire of gunfire. As we reflect on the consequences and victories of this monumental air conflict, consider diving deeper into the vast history of the Second World War. What aspects of this remarkable narrative speak to you, and where do your interests lie? Suggest a theme or an event that you would like to explore next as we continue to uncover the profound stories hidden within the pages of history. As the summer of 1940 ensued, the skies above southern England became the stage for one of the most pivotal air battles in military history, the Battle of Britain, where the iconic Spitfire fought valiantly against the formidable Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf 109. Each confrontation unfolded with breathtaking intensity, characterized by tactics and technologies that highlighted the ingenuity of aerial warfare and the immeasurable courage of the pilots involved. The British Air Defence was organized under the unified command of the Royal Air Force, RAF, facilitated through an intricate network of ground radar systems and coordinated fighter groups tasked with intercepting enemy formations. This was an era defined by the evolution of air combat, where the coordination between aerial tactics and ground-based intelligence became paramount. Britain recognized early that the defining factor in the defense of its sovereignty lay not solely in the advanced engineering of aircraft, but also in the ability to effectively mobilize, interpret data, and respond with urgency and precision. The RAF's Fighter Command was crucial in this regard, operating under the auspices of Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, whose strategic foresight laid the foundation for a resourceful defense against a numerically superior adversary. The British had only a fraction of the aircraft at the disposable force compared to the Luftwaffe. As reinforcements flowed in from Europe, Adolf Hitler's aerial campaign sought to cripple British morale through precise bombing raids, targeting both military installations and urban centers. Each campaign by the Luftwaffe was a deliberate assault meant to fracture the spirits of the British populace while exerting pressure to compel the government into seeking a peace settlement. Fighter Command's commitment to the Dowding system, which integrated control rooms, radar assistance, and direct communication with the aerial fighters, became critical in managing the fast-paced engagements that filled the skies with the sheer sound of battle. In the face of adversity, British pilots flew the legendary Supermarine Spitfire, a marvel of aviation engineering that brought together speed, agility, and firepower in a way that resonated with the ethos of British resolve. The design, characterized by its distinctive elliptical wings and powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, allowed for superior performance in dogfights, enabling pilots to outmaneuver the enemy when they found themselves at close quarters. The aerial tactics employed by RAF pilots frequently involved using the Spitfire's maneuverability to entice the Germans into dogfights, where the tight turning radius could outsmart the Messerschmitt Bf 109's raw firepower. The Bf 109, while formidable, suffered from being heavily armed yet less agile in tight maneuvers, with its flush-mounted cannons designed for long-range engagements. This discrepancy in aerial tactics defined dogfights that would become legendary in air combat lore, exemplified in the dramatic confrontations above Kent and London, marking a technological and tactical juxtaposition that determined the tempo of aerial warfare during the time. The psychological toll of this battle extended beyond the physical realities of engagement. The pilots faced different kinds of mortality on each sortie, reflected in both the harrowing losses and the grim realities of combat fatigue. Each mission amassed crucial intelligence and demanded a level of concentration that often strained the mental fortitude of even the most seasoned combatants. Tales of camaraderie flourished among pilots who shared the skies and the stories of their fallen comrades. The fervent emotions tied to these tragic losses anchored the resolve of those who remained in the cockpit. The resounding message was one of unity, not just among peers in the cockpit but also with the families and communities rooting for their success below. The ethos of the few, immortalized in the annals of history by the words of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, underscored the critical role these young men played in safeguarding their homeland. Concurrently, the Luftwaffe's campaign underwent modifications in response to the fierce British resistance. Initially relying heavily on the Bf 109, German command had to recalibrate strategies, implementing broader formations for the bombers, escorted by fighters tasked with maintaining superiority in the scarce airspace above Britain. Tactics of coordinated assaults, aiming for the obliteration of RAF airfields, and a committed focus on destroying radar installations became essential to extend their reach. However, what they underestimated were the fierce spirits inhabiting the cockpit of the Spitfire and Hurricane. Throughout these engagements, fighter pilots exhibited extraordinary levels of resilience, as their aircraft became symbols of national identity and indomitable spirit. The ramifications of these dogfights stretched deep into the fabric of both nations. The stark divide between the successes and failures of either side revealed profound implications for the war's trajectory. The Axis powers had their sights set firmly on a quick British capitulation, and as waves of Luftwaffe aircraft engaged, the failure to achieve air superiority loomed large in the German strategic framework. British victories were incrementally reinforcing Allied morale. With each downed Bf 109 or aborted bombing run, confidence surged among those who believed firmly in their capacity to overcome. This inversion of expectation created ripples throughout Europe, galvanizing resistance and inspiring populations under Axis rule to consider defiance. By late September, the intensity of the aerial assault reached a climactic threshold. On September 15th, hailed as Battle of Britain Day, the Luftwaffe unleashed an extensive offensive. However, it was met with determined resolve. The RAF, in a bold show of valor and tactical acumen, intercepted waves of German bombers challenging the efficiency of their formations. The ferocity of British resistance ultimately contributed to the Luftwaffe recalibrating their strategy, shifting focus away from military installations and toward indiscriminate bombing campaigns targeting London and other urban centers. This change was meant to demoralize the British citizens, but unwittingly gave the RAF time to recover. The inherent resilience amid chaos ultimately thwarted German ambitions to achieve a decisive victory. As dogfights raged on through layered clouds of debris and smoke, the aerial ballet came to symbolize not merely military prowess, but also the deep courage displayed by individuals who rose to confront adversity head-on. The human impact of the Battle of Britain encompassed stories of love, loss, sacrifice, and survival, narratives etched in the hearts of pilots and civilians alike, forever intertwined within the broader context of warfare. Each pilot's fate was inextricably tied to the outcome of the air battle and its significance on the unfolding theater of the Second World War. These experiences and costs, sustained through harrowing engagements, were embedded within a cultural narrative destined to inspire future generations. Ultimately, as the dust settled on the Battle of Britain in the following months, it became evident that the aerial conflict had shifted not only the dynamics of the war, but also the long-term implications for air warfare, propelling developments in tactics and technology, and embedding itself in collective memory. Each dogfight, fought against the backdrop of a resilient nation, fused the skies with a sense of purpose, adhering to the mantra that freedom and patriotism would always shine, even amidst dark clouds of destruction that circled above. The idea of fighting not only for survival but for the future became a cornerstone of the ethos that had emerged thus far in the war, laying profound groundwork for the campaigns that would follow in the ensuing years. As such, the Battle of Britain remained more than a mere assault of aircraft. It stood as an enduring testament to the undying spirit of humanity in its quest for liberty amidst the harshest adversities. As the air war over Britain escalated, a myriad of tactical innovations emerged, each designed to capitalize on the strengths and counter the weaknesses of the opposing forces. The Royal Air Force, RAF, faced with the challenge of defending its homeland against the Luftwaffe, effectively redeployed its resources to optimize its combat readiness and aerial defense systems. Central to this strategy was the development of an integrated air defense network, epitomized by the utilization of radar technology. Early warning systems allowed the fighter command to detect incoming enemy formations, enabling British pilots to scramble their Spitfires and Hurricanes in a race against time. The deployment of chain-home radar stations along the southern coast was pivotal. These stations became the eyes of the RAF, collecting data on enemy movements and providing crucial information to the ground control officers who coordinated the defensive operations. On the other side of the Channel, Hermann Göring, the commander of the Luftwaffe, faced his share of strategic dilemmas. Initially, his forces excelled with the use of the Messerschmitt Bf 109, a fighter renowned for its speed and climbing ability, particularly during the early phases of the campaign. However, as the battle wore on, it became increasingly clear that logistical constraints, including the limitations on fuel and operational range of the Messerschmitt, hindered Luftwaffe effectiveness. German tactics evolved through various phases, from the focused assault on British airfields to the more indiscriminate bombing of cities, a shift that ultimately elongated the conflict and eroded morale rather than breaking the spirit of British citizens. Each encounter forced pilots from both sides to adapt in real time to shifting tactics, turning the skies above into chaotic theaters of war. As British pilots engaged in dogfights, a critical component of aerial warfare came into play: the role of leadership and command decisions. Figures like Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, the architect of the RAF's air defense system, played a crucial role in shaping the outcomes of skirmishes by ensuring tightly coordinated operations between ground control and airborne units. Conversely, the Luftwaffe's strategy, characterized by shifts that often lacked coherence, was marked by an indecisive command structure that struggled to effectively adapt to changing battlefield dynamics. As the British fighters tangled in the skies, the balance of morale shifted. Having successfully thwarted initial assault waves, the RAF grew in relentless determination, showcasing the indomitable spirit of its pilots. Their bravery became storied, a mix of audacity and desperation fueled by homesickness and the urging call to protect their loved ones. The emotional toll on pilots was profound. Each flight into hostile territory was accompanied not just by the fear of death, but also by the weight of expectation. For many young men, such as Pilot Officer Douglas Bader, flying became a personal crusade. Bader, who flew with prosthetic legs after losing his own in a pre-war flying accident, epitomized the unyielding tenacity of the RAF pilots. Every engagement represented more than a mere military skirmish. It transformed into an exercise of willpower and determination. As friends fell from the skies, either due to mechanized failure or the unyielding guns of the Bf 109s, the bonds forged amongst squadron members not only defined their immediate experience, but also laid the foundation for future generations of aviators who would follow in their wake. The psychological effects of these aerial battles transcended the cockpit. For the men fighting above, knowledge of their comrades' sacrifices weighed heavily, fostering a sense of accountability and camaraderie that propelled them into further engagements. Ground crews, often overlooked in the broader narrative of air conflict, played an equally important role. They worked around the clock, facing bombardments and constant threat, to ensure that the Spitfires could take to the skies with minimal downtime. The gripping urgency of these operations intensified during the Blitz, where nighttime raids transformed cities into landscapes of chaos and constant terror, meant that every plane mended, every gun repaired, came to symbolize salvation for their beleaguered homeland. The physical and emotional toll on these crews was immense, yet unyielding loyalty fueled their resolve, as victory was a communal endeavor forged in the heat of labor and love for Britain. Amidst these human dramas, technological advancements reshaped the nature of aerial engagements. The Hawker Hurricane, while overshadowed in popular lore by the sleek Spitfire, proved to be a remarkable workhorse. Armed with 8 .303 Browning machine guns, it showcased devastating firepower that often incapacitated German aircraft with devastating efficiency. Tactical formations, such as the Vic formation, enabled pilots to cover one another, enhancing survivability in pitched battles, while also delivering concentrated fire against enemy aircraft. Each successful engagement not only destroyed a Luftwaffe plane, but also resonated within the psyche of the nation, symbolizing resilience against overwhelming odds. Weather played an unpredictable role in combat operations during the battle, with fog, rain, and overcast skies often disrupting sorties. The RAF pilots learned to navigate and exploit these natural elements to their advantage, using them to shield their movements. However, German bombers, particularly the Heinkel He-111 and Dornier Du-17, began shifting their focus towards urban centers like London. This strategic pivot not only aimed at damaging British morale, but was also a psychological tactic designed to stretch the RAF's resources thin by forcing it to defend not just military targets, but also civilian lives and homes. Thus, the war in the air transformed into a multifaceted battle, blending military tactics with psychological warfare, as both sides sought to outmaneuver and outsmart one another within the confines of constrained resources and burgeoning losses. As autumn descended upon Britain, the month of September 1940 emerged as a pivotal point in the Battle of Britain. The Luftwaffe's inability to achieve air superiority forced them into a tactical retreat, marking a watershed moment not only for the RAF, but for the course of the war itself. In the face of dwindling aircraft and faltering morale, both sides emerged from the battle scarred yet fundamentally altered. The Luftwaffe's operational difficulties illuminated the vulnerabilities in their strategies, subsequently shifting their attention toward other campaigns that would eventually lead them into Russia during Operation Barbarossa. For the British, however, the outcome represented a kind of victory, a testament to the power of unity and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. In conclusion, the interplay of technological innovation, human determination, and tactical evolution during the Battle of Britain reshaped air warfare. The relentless dogfights between Spitfires and Messerschmitts etched not just a narrative of survival into the annals of military history, but also forged the very identity of a nation in the crucible of combat. The legacies of those who fought in the skies linger still, a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made when liberty hung in the balance, for in those fierce doctrine battles, a sense of hope emerged from smoke and fire, propelling the spirit of resistance that would echo throughout subsequent phases of the Second World War. As the Battle of Britain reached its zenith, the airspace above England became a theater of relentless confrontation, a crucible where mechanical prowess clashed with the indomitable human spirit. Each dogfight encapsulated a broader struggle not just for tactical superiority, but also for the very soul of a nation. The Spitfire and the Messerschmitt Bf 109 became symbols, the Spitfire representing British defiance and innovation, while the Messerschmitt embodied German efficiency and lethal design. However, behind this filtering down to aircraft performance metrics and engineering philosophies lay a greater tale of command decisions, the agony of loss, and the resilience of men thrown into the maelstrom of war, where every split-second decision could culminate in either victory or death. As September waned, the Luftwaffe escalated its campaign, deploying tactics both crude and cunning in efforts to neutralize the Royal Air Force. The shift to targeting aircraft factories and air bases, crucial for the RAF's sustaining capacity, revealed a reflection of their desperate situation. Inside the facilities dotted across the English countryside, workers toiled tirelessly, a portrait of industrial mobilization against the backdrop of looming air raids. Meanwhile, German intelligence underestimated the resolve of British factories and the ingenuity of mechanics, often deploying limited resources in fruitless attempts to cripple production lines. The RAF, keenly aware that the clock was ticking, utilized every resource at their disposal, employing a shadow factory strategy, where dispersed and covert units produced Spitfires and Hurricanes, thereby obscuring their true capacity from enemy reconnaissance. In combat, the Spitfire's elliptical wings and Rolls-Royce Merlin engine bestowed it with an agility that became the bane of opposing pilots. The aircraft, with its thin airframe and advanced dive abilities, facilitated swift, looping maneuvers that allowed seasoned RAF pilots to exploit their adversaries' momentary vulnerabilities. The iconic dogfights were often characterized by spirals of twisting foes, each pilot's instincts pushed to the limit as they climbed, dove, and banked into tight turns. Yet, it was not merely ability in the air that led to success. Careful coordination between fighter command and ground stations was fundamental. The use of radar, still a fledgling technology, allowed RAF pilots to respond with remarkable rapidity to incoming German formations. The chain-home radar system became the nerve center of British air defense, enabling interception strategies that would route Spitfires towards their opponents with surgical precision, giving the RAF a crucial edge in timing and positioning. Conversely, the Luftwaffe faced its own challenges. Initially banked on the notion of blitzkrieg, their high-flying tactics faltered as the British response became more robust and their ground support operations less than adequate. Focke-Wulf fighters were brought in, bolstering their strength, but ideas of a quick victory were washed as the determination of the British resolve began to harden like steel tempered in flame. The Luftwaffe's strategy was marred not solely by enemy tactics, but from internal issues. Communication breakdowns and logistical strains began to ripple through their command structure. Fuel shortages and mechanical failures afflicted their aircrews, hindering their ability to sustain prolonged engagements. For many German pilots, the rising losses starkly contrasted with their expectations. Each sortie became a dark echo of the last, leaving them to grapple with disillusionment amid the stern execution of their superiors' directives. One of the most crucial turning points occurred on September 15, 1940, a day that would be immortalized in history as Battle of Britain Day. This fierce engagement saw over 1,000 sorties flown by both sides. The embattled skies over Kent bore witness to a monumental clash, with the English Channel framing the theater of engagement. British pilots, buoyed by the collective spirit of the nation, charged proudly into the unfolding chaos. One notable figure that day was Flight Lieutenant James Brindley Nicholson, who earned the only Victoria Cross awarded to a pilot in the Battle of Britain. Despite being severely injured in a dogfight, he managed to return to his squadron and defend against incoming enemy attacks, a testament to the raw courage and resilience exhibited by RAF pilots in such dire circumstances. The daily reports of casualties compounded the sense of urgency and sacrifice. Families at home received telegrams bearing the heavy weight of lost lives, each loss stung by the knowledge of sacrifice on a national scale. The impact of air warfare transcended simple tactical maneuvers. It reshaped the fabric of British society. Civilian morale became directly tied to the immediate outcomes of air engagements. The underground shelters filled with families demonstrated not only a physical response to air raids, but also an emotional fortitude. Children, their faces often smudged with soot and confusion, became unwitting witnesses to the might of war. Yet amid the bombings, acts of bravery emerged. Some civilians formed auxiliary fire services, operating under horrific conditions to combat the fires ignited by German bombs, while others helped wounded pilots escape the wreckage of their fighters. Britain's collective will became a tapestry of resilience woven through acts of kindness and courage, forged in the fires of conflict. By autumn's close and moving into winter of 1940, it became clear that the strategic landscape of the war had shifted irrevocably. The Luftwaffe, with its faltering designs and dwindling capacity for sustained attacks, would now confront a united nation resolved in its defense. The lessons gleaned from the skies, the importance of strategy, coordination, and adaptability, would echo throughout the subsequent theaters of the war. As the troops and logisticians from both sides recalibrated and redefined their operational goals, the psychological reverberations of the dogfights would continue to affect change far beyond the idyllic English countryside. The dogfights between the Spitfires and Messerschmitts not only encapsulated the dramatic essence of aerial combat, but also solidified Britain's will to resist, illustrating the profound intersection of technology, tactics, and human endurance. As history often teaches, it is in such harrowing trials that the future is forged anew, shaped by the lessons of conflict and the sacrifices of those who dared to fly into the unknown. As the Battle of Britain raged on through the summer and autumn of 1940, the airspace above southern England transformed into a brutal chessboard where tactics, technology, and human valor were simultaneously tested and refined. The Royal Air Force, RAF, faced the formidable Luftwaffe in a concerted struggle that would ultimately determine the fate of the British Isles. Central to this aerial contest was the iconic supermarine Spitfire, a nimble fighter, and its adversary, the Messerschmitt Bf 109, heralded for its speed and firepower. Each engagement was not merely a clash of machinery, but a culmination of strategic decisions born from the crucible of warfare, with outcomes carrying far-reaching repercussions for both nations involved. Tactically, the RAF relied on a decentralized command structure that allowed squadrons of Spitfires and Hawker Hurricanes to respond swiftly to the Luftwaffe's offensives. This flexibility was pivotal during the Blitz period, which saw extensive German bombing raids targeting British cities. The adoption of the Big Wing strategy, coordinating the attacks of multiple squadrons, came to the fore in various skirmishes. This approach aimed to saturate a designated area with a concentrated presence of fighter aircraft, overwhelming the enemy through sheer numbers and tactical surprise. Flying at altitudes that ranged generally between 15,000 and 24,000 feet, the RAF pilots executed their interceptive maneuvers in formations like the renowned Vic, or echelons, which allowed for mutual protection against instinctive German attacks known to be particularly aggressive and relentless. Conversely, the Luftwaffe, under the command of the seasoned Hermann Göring, employed a tactic characterized by the principle of shock and awe, hoping to break British morale by flattening key infrastructure and instilling terror among the civilian population. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, equipped with a 20mm cannon and 50 caliber machine guns, provided the Germans a significant edge in firepower during individual dogfights. Yet, despite their considerable advantage in numbers and armament, the Luftwaffe faced formidable challenges of its own. Poor weather conditions, logistical difficulties, and the relentless resiliency of RAF pilots began to take their toll. As the summer faded and winter approached, the German aircraft, designed for speed and agility, struggled to maintain their operational tempo due to increased maintenance issues and the mounting psychological pressure of sustained combat. Simultaneously, the human aspect of the conflict became starkly evident. Behind every pilot was a story of bravery, fear, and determination. Many of the RAF's fighter pilots were young men, barely out of their teens, some barely having flown combat before the onset of the battle. They often faced the grim reality of their own mortality in dogfights against highly trained German pilots, a fierce predicament where an instant's hesitation could lead to disaster. Each flight into the fray demanded not only technical skill, but also the ability to process the chaos of aerial warfare while striving for poise under fire. The emergence of new RAF fighter squadrons led to the integration of a diverse group of pilots, including those from Commonwealth nations and other allies, all quickly learning the trade in the theater of battle. Their aerial engagements resulted in a mix of jubilation with every victory, intertwined with sorrow from the inevitable losses. Despite having the technological edge, the Luftwaffe's inability to achieve air superiority represented a critical miscalculation. Initial strategic objectives, such as the destruction of Britain's radar installations, were partially successful, but ultimately fell short. The legacy of British innovation, notably embodied in the chain-home radar system, provided significant surveillance and warning capabilities. RAF Fighter Command exploited these burgeoning technological advancements through real-time intelligence, allowing for a more incisive response to enemy movements than previously anticipated. Günther Korten, a prominent Luftwaffe commander, acknowledged in post-war analyses that the decision to shift focus toward bombing London rather than concentrating efforts on taking out RAF airfields was a profound tactical error, marking a turning point in the battle. In the thick of aerial encounters, the simplistic division of Spitfires and Messerschmitts into rival factions belies the complex reality of warfare. Each dogfight carried with it harrowing personal narratives reflecting both the chivalric tradition of the fighter pilot and the grim realities of war. RAF pilots often shared stories of engagements where they narrowly evaded enemy fire, feeling the ping of bullets grazing their aircraft, where an enemy maneuver could spell the end of their mission and life. The startling visuals of fiery wreckage falling from the sky painted apocalyptic pictures across the English landscape, thus serving as a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Brave acts of gallantry pervaded the skies. RAF pilots would frequently engage in daring rescues, exchanging blows with enemy pilots while simultaneously downing enemy aircraft and returning to assist downed comrades. As the Battle of Britain reached its critical juncture, the determination of both the RAF and Luftwaffe signaled a profound dichotomy within the narrative of warfare. While the Luftwaffe thrived on the blitzkrieg ideology, subduing rapidly via overwhelming force, the RAF grounded itself in defending not just airspace, but the very essence of British identity and unity. High Command began to recognize the influential role that pilot morale played in the aerial domain. Strategies thus shifted to incorporate not only the tactical, but also the psychological, considering the importance of propaganda, the dissemination of victory stories, and the necessity of sustaining conviction among the populace. With the arrival of autumn, operational fatigue set in as prolonged combat stretched both sides. The strains of sustained aerial warfare pressured resources, fuel supplies dwindled, and maintenance schedules became increasingly cumbersome. For the Luftwaffe, this period marked the acceleration of operational losses. As German aircraft fell beneath RAF guns, the damage was twofold, both in material and morale. The steadfastness of the British populace, bolstered by tales of aerial heroism, proved counterproductive to German intentions, reverberating through the fabric of national spirit. The echoes of the dogfights, encapsulated in stringent tactics, heroic displays, and the echoes of engines roaring across the heavens, told a larger story of survival that transcended mere combat. Eventually, as 1940 unspooled toward its conclusion, the dawning realization set in that the Battle of Britain had exemplified a critical inflection point, not merely in the arc of aerial combat history, but in the larger tapestry of warfare itself. The lessons learned among the clouds reverberated through command structures, instilling pivotal doctrines that would reverberate through temples of military strategy for decades to come. The Spitfire and the Messerschmitt had etched their names into the annals of history, not only for their operational significance, but as symbols characterizing the indomitable spirit of those who flew, and the plethora of collateral lives entwined within the combat's reach. In transforming the skies from a battleground of machines to a haven for human spirit, the Battle of Britain ultimately redefined national resolve and courage during one of history's gravest confrontations. As 1940 progressed, the clash between the Royal Air Force and the Luftwaffe grew increasingly desperate as each combatant sought to dominate the skies above Britain. The Battle of Britain, often viewed through the lens of the Spitfire's elegant form and the Messerschmitt Bf 109's aggressive lines, was more than a mere contest of aircraft. It represented a crucible where tactics, technology, morale, and sheer human resilience collided. The Spitfire, emblematic of British engineering, benefited from its superior speed and maneuverability, optimized for dogfighting. In contrast, the Bf 109, a product of meticulous design and engineering prowess, boasted a powerful Daimler-Benz engine and a potent armament that made it formidable in both speed and lethality. Yet, beyond their technical specifications, lay a deeper narrative marked by tactical evolution and human tragedy. The initial phases of the battle were dominated by the Luftwaffe's strategic bombing campaign, designed to cripple British air power. It began with focused assaults on airfields, radar installations, and aircraft factories, targets essential for sustaining RAF capabilities. Yet, this initial plan steadily evolved. German commanders, including Hermann Göring, expected a swift victory through sustained aerial bombardment that would demoralize the British populace and government alike. However, the failure to achieve air superiority in these early months forced a necessary reassessment. The RAF's resilience, fueled by the strategic importance of radar and a network of fighter command operations, had blunted the impact of the Luftwaffe's initial assaults. The British Dowding system, a complex command and control framework that effectively utilized radar data to vector fighters into the fray, was crucial in this early phase, allowing faster response times and better coordination among squadrons. This reliance on technology introduced a paradigm shift in air combat, heralding the importance of information and communication in warfare. As the summer faded and autumn settled over Britain, the Luftwaffe altered its tactics, targeting cities and infrastructure in the Blitz, a concerted effort to terrorize the civilian population and destroy British morale. Bombing campaigns transitioned from military to civilian targets, revealing a shift in German strategy that focused on breaking the will of the British people rather than solely destroying military assets. The human impact of these bombings was profound. Across cities like London, Birmingham, and Coventry, the chaos that ensued, firestorms, casualties, and destruction, was designed to instill fear and resign the populace to despair. Yet paradoxically, the bombing intensified the spirit of resilience. Instead of cowering, communities banded together, providing aid and comfort to one another, leading to a significant rallying effect. The British "keep calm and carry on" ethos became more than propaganda. It was a lived reality in bomb shelters, where families shared stories, and in the streets, where volunteers stitched together makeshift blankets and delivered supplies to those in need. In the sky, the dogfights intensified, outlined by intricate choreography born from urgency and necessity. The Spitfire pilots, trained under rigorous conditions, learned quickly that inadequate situational awareness could mean life or death. Tactics evolved. Pilots adopted dynamic engagements rather than static confrontations. The notion of turning fights, where the focus shifted to maneuverability over raw speed, became more pronounced. This pivot was exemplified during engagements where experienced pilots utilized the boom and zoom technique, quickly diving from altitude, attacking before the enemy could adequately respond, and then climbing away to safety before re-engaging or returning to base. This tactical realignment required not only robotic precision from the aircraft, but also decisive psychological warfare tactics. The very act of entering the engagement space expected to terrify enemy pilots through intimidation as much as capability. German tactics, however, were not static either. The introduction of the Bf 109E, heavily armed with 20mm cannons and machine guns, allowed it to effectively engage Spitfires in head-to-head encounters. But as Kriegsmarine losses mounted, there arose friction within the Luftwaffe, manifested as crumbling morale among pilots, experiencing relentless attrition. They became beleaguered by encounters with formidable enemies and an omnipresent risk of being outgunned. These psychological strains often found their way into embargoed combat reports. Luftwaffe pilots reported to one another, "Every time we move forward, they're right back at us." Indeed, the war of attrition had settled into the psyche of these men, creating a realm of doubt and fear, eating away at their once elite status. As the seasons advanced and the weather turned harsh, operational limits challenged both air services. The clarity once provided by radar engagements began to fade with fog and rain, and maintenance demands increased dramatically under duress from grueling flying hours. Even as fresh replacements filled the ranks of the RAF and Luftwaffe, the seasoned pilots, those who had faced off against one another in dogfights that culminated in an orchestra of sky and fire, came to understand the true price of war. Each engagement was a brutal ballet, defined by the flicker of gunfire, spiraling aircraft, and the roar of engines echoing within the vast expanse of the sky. Captured pilots from either side carried essential intelligence that yielded both intelligence and fear, forging a cycle of retribution and loss. The culmination of these air battles took on an ironic character. The longer the Luftwaffe pressed, the more they redefined their original objectives. The hope had been a decisive air campaign that would ground English hopes. However, the sustained efforts merely showcased a different narrative. The British will was not to be easily extinguished. By late 1940, operational lessons learned within aerial engagements began to pave the way for future strategies. The emphasis shifted. The need for coordinated assaults that incorporated human spirit and technological leverage reverberated through the ranks. Commanders on both sides emerged from these ordeal-ridden months, receiving lessons that would inform engagements in North Africa, and later against the Luftwaffe over the cities of Germany itself. Thus, the aerial tussles of Spitfire and Messerschmitt came to symbolize more than mere machines of war. Humanity underpinning their flight transformed the air battle's legacy to one of resilience. The dogfights woven into the fabric of the Battle of Britain were not merely incidences of destruction, but a complex interplay of human will against despair, an engagement of national identity. With the embers of conflict still smoldering as winter set in, the realization became evident. While machines crossed the skies, it was the spirit of a determined populace that ultimately determined the fate of the battle. As history unfolded, the lessons learned among the clouds morphed into timeless narratives of valor, sacrifice, and ultimate resolve, characteristics that would define much of the conflict yet to come.